Hello.
Hi, this is Sally Somsel. I'm going to be driving home from work on my phone. So can you hear me okay, Teresa?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm going to mute myself and then I'm listening.
Okay.
Hi, Teresa.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Are you in Manistee?
Yes.
Okay. I haven't been outside lately, so I haven't seen tracks going to and from.
Yeah, I'm here on and off. I'm in Grand Rapids sometimes and sometimes here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no school today. Oh.
Well, it's 5:30, 5:31. Looks like we have a few people have joined us. Looks like we're up to about 10. All right. Well, let's get started. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you finding time to join us this evening. We've got a bit of an update and some information related to some efforts that the district has been working on. So hopefully you can see the presentation on the screen. Ken Blakey-Shell, our tech director, is assisting me with that this evening. So thank you, Ken. And so let's start with a project update. Next slide, please. We have three things that we're going to review the current timeline, understanding local opportunities, and project assurance. So let's do a reflection of the current timeline. Next slide, please. And this is a busy schedule, and Shannon Westgate has helped us, the district, put this together. So I am going to ask Shannon to go through this timeline and reflect what's going on and what we anticipate working on in the near future and extended future. Are you there, Shannon?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so yes, this is a very busy timeline and there's a lot of moving parts. And so there's a lot that's represented here and maybe a little bit difficult to see on the screen, but it is actually on the website, on the maps2020.org website. You can take a look at this. It can also be downloaded. If you go to, well, first of all, you'll see the little red arrow there towards the left of the timeline. That is where we are today. So if you could advance to the next slide. Some of the highlights of what we're looking at here is we are currently working with the architectural and engineering firm. We've been doing so over the past year, looking at all of the details. So we're looking at the use of the classrooms. We've had a lot of meetings with staff to be certain that the decisions that are being made are going to serve the needs right down to the classroom level. So those design elements are being finalized now. The intention is to have those plans ready for spring, early summer finalization, so that can be, they'll be in a ready to build format. That has to be done prior to any sort of bidding that can begin. So that is where we stand in the actual process for design and planning. We're also right now taking a look at what is the building transition going to look like? Where are the students going to be during the construction phase of this project? So we're meeting to make plans for how that will be managed and how everybody will be properly and safely accommodated during that time period. We're looking at the 1927 building. The expected demolition would be likely summertime before the fall of 2022 anyway, because the fall of 2022 is when we would begin the building at the Kennedy site. So that's the very beginning of the project that is expected to go on through 2024. And then we won't actually see anything happen at the Jefferson site until that building has been completely emptied, is no longer in service. And we're looking at probably somewhere around the spring of 2025 before that building would actually come down. Any questions about that?
I have a question about the 1927 building. Mm-hmm. Are there plans for recycling the materials from that building?
Ron, have you got an update on that?
Yeah, as we start to build the bid documents for that, we're looking for that opportunity within the scope of work for that building coming down to include the reuse of what materials are reusable in that building. So that is part of the scope.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on the timeline? You know, some of the things I've been asked is, well, I thought that building would be down by now. And just at, the 1927 building, just please remember that there's 250 students that are 20 feet from that building every day, and that there's an elevator that's attached to both buildings that serve for operations of that building. So, we're moving the bid process for Kennedy Elementary with the demolition all at the same time. So that's again, that construction for the Kennedy site will start in the fall, and the first thing that will happen will that building coming down and site improvements for the addition that it's going to be added to the Kennedy Elementary building. So that is our current situation.
Yep, the next slide just shows those highlights that we just went through. And then following that, we wanted to provide some information about our discussions locally.
Yeah, I've been contacted, the district, myself been contacted by Rachel Nelson. She is the county treasurer, and she also is the chair of the Manistee County Land Bank Authority. I learned about the land bank. I met with her, learned about the land bank, and supportive opportunities for the district. Spoke to our attorney about how this works and what possibilities may exist. Our attorney, Witroon, is well versed on the land bank. He works for municipalities and school districts, so he's well versed, like I said, in this process. Share details of our work with the Jefferson Neighborhood Committee. That's what we're doing. Establishing a shared goals of working with the community to create the best possible options for this property. And again, Rachel's interested in meeting with representatives from the district and from this committee to explore options. So the Land Bank Authority, there's a county-based land bank authority. There's a state land bank authority. And there's property that is given, provided, or sold to the Land Bank Authority, and it is a way for streamlining a process for developers in our communities. And that way, they know that these projects are eligible for supportive grants, brownfield money, and so forth. Are opportunities for developers when the property comes from a land bank situation. So I talked to the Board of Education. They're kind of intrigued about this as a potential. I think maybe our next page will represent some advantages for the district potentially. Anything else, Shannon, that I'm missing?
No, When you spoke with Rachel, I think it's important that this committee understands that she is well aware of the work that's been done so far in the discussions that we've had. So she has an understanding that this is not a new committee, that there's been work done, and that she's very interested, because something that she had shared was that they are very interested in making sure that they're working collaboratively within the community to come up with the best possible solution.
Yeah, and when I suggested to Rachel that we would like to grab a couple of members of this Jefferson Neighborhood Committee to help us meet with the Land Bank Authority, she was really, she was really positive about that suggestion and encouraged that. We're really looking for the both of us for a successful relationship and cooperation. To model for our community and for our county. That we really have the same mission and goals. And that definitely includes members from this committee voicing and being part of that process. All right, next slide. Potential benefits. Again, guaranteed demolition of the Jefferson building within the timeline represented in the bond project. That is a guarantee. We are also still able to define deed restrictions to protect the intended use of the property under the land bank parameters. Speaking with Rachel, we working with the Jefferson Neighborhood Committee, I think it was very clear and apparent that our cooperation together with the district and this committee, that we were able to establish parameters related to deed restrictions, and that we, if we are working on a housing potential for this property, that it's suitable for the neighborhood, and that it complements the neighborhood, and that it is in collaboration with the neighborhood. So, through the land bank, the developers would be required to have a feasible plan and timeline, or the dollars are returned to the land bank. So what the idea would be, the advantage to have the land bank authority take the building down. And once that's established, there's a potential exchange of the property to the land bank authority. Now, there would be no exchange of the property if the land bank was not able to acquire and take the building down in the timeline established through the bond project. So that we not only do we have the ability to have deed restrictions, we also have the ability to include in the in this process established timeline to get the building down. All right, next slide.
Actually, he skipped over just one slide. So if we go back one slide, the benefits information was on the previous slide. There you go.
Collaboration with a local state agency provides potential expansion of funding options for the project. Again, here I spoke about the brownfield opportunities may exist to fund demolish of the Jefferson building, allowing allocated funds to be focused on other bond project priorities. If the bond funds are not used for the removal of the building, we would be allowed a more flexible option for property use. Now, you remember our conversation months ago related to if funds are used for the property, then we would be limited for what we could possibly do with the property because of the use of those funds. So as long as there was a debt to be paid through the bond authority, that we would be limited. And if we go this route, then those limitations wouldn't be attached to the property because we did not use bond funds. Working collaboratively, we can create the best possible future for this property. So that, again, modeling and showing cooperation within our community between entities, and compromising, getting to a position that best serves our community, the Jefferson neighborhood, and the district it would be the potential goal. So next slide, and I think we covered that. All right, so any questions? Kind of dropped a big concept on you guys tonight. And believe me, we've only moved this as far as a conversation. a reveal from Rachel and the Land Bank Authority. I spoke to the school board about this possibility, and I spoke to the attorney assuring us that we could continue this conversation with deed restrictions in mind, and also guarantees that the building would come down as within the project timeline also. We would set money, our bond money aside for the demolition of this building during our bond work, just to ensure if the Land Bank Authority could not meet the expectations, that we would have this money to take the building down. And we would be mandated to do so because it's part of the bond scope that we reported to Treasury, so that it has to come down because it's part of ballot, part of our commitment to Michigan Treasury Department also. So we would guarantee that it would be coming down, no risk involved with that. So questions?
Yes, Ron, I have sort of a big picture question, I believe. Just because I'm fairly new here and I'm trying to understand what's happening. So my understanding is that the land today, the Jefferson site today, is a public land. It's a public school. It's a public land. And then what you have presented tonight, if I understand it correctly, is that the public, meaning the school district, will hand over that site to the land authority. And then the land authority will sort of announce it to developers, and the developer will come in with a plan. If I understand that right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I understand it correctly, this is handing a public piece of land over to private enterprises. Is that correct?
The district would be providing the land to a public entity, and the Land Bank Authority is a public entity.
Okay, but then I thought you said that the land authority then would ask developers to come up with plans for the site.
Correct.
So then it will be turned over to a private, become private.
Yep, that is, you described the process of the Land Bank Authority, that and those profits are used to purchase other properties, the public entity of the Land Bank Authority, or development of properties for improvement of communities. So it's a state entity, and cities, villages, but mostly counties sign up to belong to this bank authority for improvement of their communities. But yes, that would be sold, but the profits from that go to a public entity of the Land Bank Authority.
So,
but I want to make sure that they don't hand it over. I'm talking about deed restrictions. So when we hand the property over for the cost of demolition to the Land Bank Authority, those deed restrictions go with that property for moving forward.
What are the examples of deed restrictions?
Well, you would say lots on this property would be X amount of square feet. You could say X amount of square footage, not to be less than X square footage for the dwellings. And you could put restrictions on what type of dwellings that they would be. So
again, to the big picture, the city of Manistee has a master plan, and it has zoning. Is it just that easy to just say that we take a piece of public land and turn it over to developers to develop it as private properties?
You're confusing me, Vidar, about turning it over. There would be a transaction there. And then, like I said, the money that comes from the developer for the property goes to the Land Bank Authority, which is a public entity. And then they use those funds by restricted ways to use that funds by the Land Bank Authority for developing other properties. And so it's just not handing it over to public entities and the public's out the money. They use the funds from selling the property from the Land Bank Authority to a developer to maybe develop other portions of our county. And they keep that cycle going through profits.
So I won't monopolize this meeting. I just have one more question.
Please, Vidar.
Some of us put a lot of work into a proposal for that site that incorporates park-like development.
Yep.
And is that plan or that proposal that we made, has that been evaluated by anyone, or is it just thrown away like nothing? It doesn't mean anything.
Well, I don't, it doesn't, we need to have multiple plans. Should we just have a single entity plan, or should we have park plan, not thrown away, not disregarded, but should we have another plan that has development as a possibility? Should we have two plans to evaluate or just one?
Yeah, so how would that process be then if it's handed over to the Land Bank Authority? How would that process?
What we need to see if the Land Bank Authority is interested in the property related to the the deed restrictions that we feel are necessary to complement the neighborhood. If the Land Authority is not interested in what we would like to see done with the property related to housing, which may include a nature walk or a public space in that still, and then they would turn that down, and then we're back to a single option. But I think we owe it to the whole community to maybe have more than one option on the table for review.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just trying to understand what the process is going to be.
Yeah. So I think,
how is this going to be a democratic process?
Well, I think the authority on what to do with the property is with the school board, and they will decide which options that they would like. We'll present both options, and then they will decide. You guys, I'm asking this committee, as usual, to vet both, housing opportunity, park opportunity, to vet both options, and present to the board, or have the board have a full understanding through report of what their options are before them to make a decision.
Ron, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Right now, the way it stands, the school board owns the property and is required to continue to own the property for the length of the bond, paying the bond back. That is correct, right?
If bond proceeds are spent on the property.
Right. So if bond proceeds are spent to tear down Jefferson School, to demolish it,
yep,
then the school board cannot sell it to anybody for the period of the bond, right?
Yeah, there may be some penalties related to that, and especially if it's early on in the process, they would be way too expensive to do so. And there's limitations on how much percentage of the bond that property is, and how much of the overall bond has been spent down.
But you'd prefer not to. the school board would prefer not to do something like that that would create a problem like that, right?
Well, I think, and then if no other monies are spent, but that spot where the building is, that perhaps if we limit just that portion of the property, then that portion of the property may be limited for use.
Okay.
So if the building sits on 3 acres or 2 acres or whatever, then that would be, that's bound and tied to the bond.
So the way I interpret what you told us about working with the land bank is if the school board decides to get together with the land bank as an option, and the land bank agrees to spend their money to tear down Jefferson School because the school board will deed over that land to the land bank, then the school board is done with it. That property now is part of the land bank. And what you're telling us is the land bank is willing, Rachel Nelson, who is the director of the land bank, who is our county treasurer, is willing to work with this committee to make sure that that land is developed appropriately. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, and we have our attorney engaged who has deep experience about creating deed restrictions with land bank authorities. So I feel we're in pretty good shape. I would maybe take 2, 3 people from this committee and add probably our board has a facility committee, a subcommittee, and we probably would have 6 to 7 total members to work with the land bank authority. So I would like, the plan would be to, if you're interested in serving on this committee from the Jefferson committee, to send me an email and some rationale. I'll spell this out in an email that I'll send to you yet this week. If you're interested, send me an email of your interest and kind of why you're interested. And then we'll get a subcommittee from this committee together to work with our board committee, and that will represent helping us get a concept of how land bank authority works and work with our attorney with how deed restrictions would work and potentially what restrictions or what future we see maybe housing on this property would look like. We'll report to the full Jefferson committee about what we're doing. I don't know, perhaps even survey a bit as a possibility. And then talk to land bank authority about where we're landing with our thoughts. John, how does that sound?
Yeah, I think it's a great move on your part, on the school district's part, to do this, to look for this creative way to help with the bond process, the bond financing, and the cost of all this, and enabling this property to be utilized, in a proper manner for the benefit of everybody.
Like I said, we may be negotiating with our committee that we put together with the land bank authority to get to a landing spot that makes sense for the neighborhood. That's our goal. And our Board of Education, Teresa's here. They would not work in absence of your thoughts, opinions, and support or work. So that's their goal as a board. It has been all along.
Mr. Stoneman, Mick Szymanski, I've got a question. I've heard a rumor that there is a shortfall on the overall project because of construction costs. Is that true? And if so, is that part of the reason why the land bank opportunity actually has more value than it may have been in the past?
It's a $30 million, almost $31 million bond. We're talking about $300,000. Yes, it would be helpful. Yes, material costs are through the roof in some areas. Construction steel is out of crazy, and labor is very difficult. But in the scope of things, the cost of the building is just over $300,000 coming down. Yes, it would be helpful, but it doesn't settle issues.
Okay.
Yeah, does that make sense? Yep, we're
Yeah,
over.
yes.
We're over, but it's helpful. But it's I think the board is interested in collaboration and possibilities primarily, and then the outcome of $300,000+ is helpful. But this also, like John pointed out, it doesn't tie this property up for an extended period of time because of bond expenditures. So, right. So I think 300,000 plus is great for our budget, but I think we would spend 300,000 if we can't get to happily, if we can't meet the goals of the board and this committee. Does that make sense?
Yes, and obviously, you know, having the total use of that property available to develop is much better than it would have been with a big portion out of the front of it not available for development. So under the bond proposal, of 20% of that property right in the front would be the part that wouldn't be able to be developed. Is that from what I understood from the last time?
Yeah,
the site of the building.
Yes, but there is a lot of infrastructure for that piece of property: city, water, sewer, drain. Yep. There's a large, infrastructure bill that is also attached to that property. It needs a lot of money to be useful also. Mm-hmm. But I think this is worthy of for us to go down the road a little bit and see where it takes us.
Well, I agree. That's, again, we're in a community that is in need of single family housing, and this is a wonderful opportunity for additional housing to be built in the city itself.
I agree. And I know the goal is not to affect maybe the taxable value of the houses that are around either, that we want it suitable. And I know the board is really focused on that. So I think the next steps here are sending an email to the committee. Nancy, my assistant, will help me get that out. Soliciting interest, like to have maybe 3 people from the committee. Maybe you talk amongst yourselves about nominating or getting some people move forward. Again, we will report back to this full committee before we talk to the Land Bank Authority moving forward, just to make sure that this committee has an understanding what the objectives are and what our starting point is related to negotiations with Land Bank Authority. And that may, as Shannon, that may involve maybe some surveys of the committee and getting things narrowed down a little bit related to feedback for that position that we want to start from.
Ron, in the chat, Mike asked a couple of questions. Oh. Can I share those with you?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Mike Sokola is, the first question was, have you considered short-term rental deed restrictions for any property related to that housing?
No, but that's a possibility. Again, I don't want to suggest that I have deed restrictions in mind. I think I want to develop that through committee. But that's a good suggestion.
And then the other suggestion that he had was Housing North may be a good entity to discuss that deed restriction. They have been willing to enforce those types of restrictions in Northwest Michigan in the past.
Yep, that's a good, I'm familiar with that organization. I know we have some local representation on that organization also. And of course, our best deed restriction practice is working with our attorney too, to make sure that what we have put in place is enforceable and sustainable. But those are good suggestions. Thank you, Mike. Do you see any other questions?
I don't.
Okay.
And just so everyone knows too, I did put in the link in the chat. I put the link to Michigan Land Bank just to find out a little bit more about Land Bank. It was a new concept to me. I didn't even know that this option existed until it was brought to us recently. So it's a neat organization. So
this is Sally Samsel. I hope I'm gonna try and articulate what's in my head. So the land is school/public land, and eventually it at some point gets developed. With the way that funding is in the schools, I would like to see, I don't really want to see it develop, but I want to see the money go back to the school to benefit the kids. And I don't see how that happens in this scenario. Does that make sense?
Sally, it does. How it does benefit our students is being able to save money in the bond. Therefore, we can provide the instructional environment or help support our vision for the instructional environment at Kennedy Elementary in the future. So the money that would be set aside to take the building down or any site improvements would be able to be reused in the scope of work for the bond. Now, it is also not, it's not legal for the district. We're not land developers. So as much as that we could do is sell the property, we're not really in the position to develop land. So we're in the position to sell land. And we feel that the value of, 300 and some odd thousand, $100,000 for that property, but also for the improvement of our community would be a fair value trade. So that we do get some money out of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the cost of tearing down Jefferson would just, somebody else would absorb that cost and we gain the cost of that to put towards other programming or other parts of the bond proposal.
That's correct. And
okay.
We're dealing with inflation in the construction industry that is it's been really high and unpredictable. So this would be a benefit.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good question, Sam.
Ron, I have just a question for clarification. This might not be decided yet, but do I understand it correctly that the value of the land is now assumed to be equal to what it costs to take the building down?
No, we haven't had the property assessed.
Okay.
But that would be a fair assumption, or somewhere close, I would guess. Just knowing that the lots are usually about 20,000 in that area, or we're selling for about 20,000.
Yeah, we've done some estimates like that, Mick, and we feel we're pretty close. And like I said, there's not infrastructure for that property, so that does decrease the value of some of that property being landlocked and services not to that to the internal portions of that property. So some of the lots may be less value because of that.
Mm-hmm.
There is a chance that you could need to acquire property in the future, however, and if you retained this property, you'd already have it. I mean, this could happen again.
Oh, you mean keeping the property for future use?
Correct.
Yeah, and I think keeping the park concept is part of that consideration. I agree, and we're wondering about the future of Sand Park. We're a mutual owner of Sand Park with the city, And we're just wondering if we are in need of property in the future, that the proximity of the Manistee Elementary and what that may mean. We have a large, pretty big sized piece of property out at the Madison School in Filer Township also. And so we are holding on to some property there, and there are some possibilities within the city limits too. Let's just go down this road. I don't think we're settled on giving the property to the Land Bank Authority just so quickly. And we may not find that we can find common ground for the vision of the use of the property, and we may be, the option for housing may not arise for our use at this time. Just possible.
I have a couple thoughts. We could also consider doing a deed restriction against long-term rentals. Is kind of a aside to Mike's chat comment. And I have had dealings with the land bank already with the Habitat for Humanity. We're exploring a project right now with the land bank as well. And my thoughts, just listening through the meeting right now, is that there could be a hybrid of uses with a combination of deed restrictions and the land bank. And with our dealings with the land bank already, if there was an excess in proceeds, and Rachel would be able to tell us this, but it depends on the agreement that you have with the land bank. If there is an excess in proceeds from what the agreement is, say the school board decides to turn over the site to the land bank for the demolition cost, but if the land bank were to parcel it out and develop it and there was an excess, I believe sometimes there can be a recapture from the donating entity, which would be the school board.
Yeah, there's possibility. Sometimes that's hinged on how long the land bank authority is sitting on that property before development too. So yeah, I think there are some possibilities with that.
Yep. And the land bank does offer brownfield credits and TIF, the tax increment financing for a developer, or maybe not one developer, but could be individual lot owners if that was an option in the future. So there are some good advantages to the land bank, depending on what the intended use is. And one last, like you had mentioned, some of the parcel would be landlocked without city services, and if that were to be parceled off, the Munger Fund has to spend, I'm trying to remember what it was, but for recreational opportunities in the county, they have a set dollar amount, which is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they have to spend each year. And I don't know if Teresa, you know what that is.
Is that the Minger Fund you're referring to?
Yes, the Minger Fund, yes.
Yep. Yeah, for recreational. I don't know how they'd have to give it to an entity organization though. So I don't know if that's something that they would be able to give to the land bank. I'm not exactly sure how that's kind of awarded. I know that you have to apply for it. Are you thinking that it would be to the district, if the district applied for it for the recreational use, or after it had been kind of handed over to land bank authority?
I think there would be lots of possibilities if it was
okay.
It could be the district, it could be the city, it could be anyone.
Yeah.
It could be the Armor Youth Project to do something. But there is that fund out there that has to spend money and on recreational opportunities, and it might be a win-win for the whole community.
to piggyback a little bit off Randall there, if I could. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Another opportunity for you guys is to bring it in as like a PUD, which requires a public a good involved into it, and then making the amount of housing match what would be a public good or a park essentially involved with that as well. So you could look to that as a PUD within the city and see if that's something that a developer could come in and then make it a requirement that the park be open to the public as well. So therefore the surrounding neighborhood still garners some kind of public gain, a public park, and you still are able to get the housing as well within that.
That some comment that I made to Vidar earlier, that it may be a combination. My dog's dreaming.
I guess one of my concerns, and Mr. Stoneman, you mentioned once before, but you know, when the old building is torn down, you're going to lose that practice field behind Kennedy. And one of my concerns is there's already not enough practice fields for all of the various sports teams. And you had mentioned Sands Park, and after you had mentioned that, I was driving past Sands Park one day. I'm like, I don't see how that could be a good substitution as it is right now, because there's, you know, the fences for softball or baseball. I just don't see that the school has enough field space at this point. And if we're going to lose the Kennedy space and we're going to lose the Jefferson space, it's like there's just not enough space.
But we did put in a track that has a green space infield. That is something we didn't have in the past. And we just, the practice football field, the old track, we've put about $60,000 into that this year. We retiled it and resurfaced it and reseeded it, and it's ready to go for this fall. And by doing so, on that field, we've made it into a multiple use green space. That meaning that just the wear and tear of the football field teams will not, you know, it'll still be usable on the weekends and so forth too.
Can you tell the football team it's multi-use? because they seem quite selfish with their field space. It's like, no, this is our space. You can't have it.
Yeah, but no one's, it's just been repaired. They've been sensitive to it because it was such bad shape that it was hard to share it. Now we've improved it in a way that it can be. And why we talked about the Minger grant and the review of all the city parks, and maybe there's some money to be requested and development for the green spaces that already exist through the city also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we walked through the track last summer also, and I couldn't see, I didn't really know what it was like beforehand. I mean, it's certainly not a bigger green space, but you're saying it's better quality green space now?
The old track or the...
Yeah, the old track.
Yeah, it was being disturbed by some trees. We took the trees down. The root system was disturbing the undersoil. And so we took those down and filled it with tile so it would drain. And we put a better mixture of soil for draining and also a better surface for seed growth. And it really took off this fall pretty well. I mean, yeah, this fall pretty well. So we're looking forward to using it next year and spring.
Do you mean this year?
Yeah,
this spring?
Yeah, this spring.
Yeah.
And I know Sands Park, we've been working with talking to the city. The tennis courts are beyond repair and for safe use. We've been talking about getting those taken out, and there's it's a nice flat space where where the four tennis courts are, and it may be suitable for very young soccer space. being it fenced in, and it may be a good spot to have a young elementary soccer space there. I think there's some improvements that the city and the school district, who are co-owners of Sand Park, can start looking at Sand Park a little bit differently now that there'll be 700 students in Manistee Elementary or Kennedy Elementary. That piece of property needs to have some attention to it, Sands Park. Mm-hmm. Anything else in the chat, Shannon?
I don't see anything new, no.
All right. Well, I really thank you guys joining this evening. I think we've got some good feedback related to this idea of having a two-option approach and working genuinely towards both. But again, we know that the suitable housing situation in Manistee and thinking about this as an option is probably a responsible thing to do. And we'll be sending an email out to the committee looking for a couple of interested people that would like to join that process. And of course, we'll keep the full committee up to speed on what's going on and potentially surveying some ideas. And I've captured some of the rental ideas and the Minger grant in some notes, and long-term, short-term rental restrictions. And I highlighted the idea of land bank exceeding profit, that some of that may come back to the district. I think that's a great discussion. And but my assistant, like I said, Nancy, will send out an email soliciting those for interest, and we'll move forward with a couple of you and joining the board committee and see what the Land Bank Authority feels like cooperating. Sounds like they do, and see where it goes.
Teresa just added to the chat, please make sure Connie is included. She texted that she was unable to attend tonight. So the letter will go out to the entire committee, and future correspondence will do so as well.
Yeah, I won't restrict what I'm soliciting interest. It's going to go to the full committee, not just those here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys staying involved. I know this is over a long period of time, but I think this is just the way these kind of things go. And I hope you got a good update today on our overall bond project on timeline, and have an understanding about the Land Bank Authority and where we're going with this possibility. So I appreciate you guys tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Night.
Night.